In this IOB podcast, Captivate, podcast hosting, but so much more, and a critique of Crimeocopia. This is the IOB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and it's my goal to make your podcast the best. Thank you for listening to another IOB Podcast episode. My name is Mike. We're going to sit down with Mark Asquith, founder of, among many things, Captivate. If you don't know what Captivate is, it's similar to Buzzsprout, Podbean, or Libsyn. But Mark floored me with how Captivate differs from these other companies, especially with their dedication to growing your podcast. I think you will be really interested in hearing about this. So let's dive in. I've been in podcasting for a long time, but I've been a podcaster. You know, I haven't really ventured into different platforms. I don't go to the conferences, or I haven't in the past. I just, do my thing and talk to my listeners and stuff like that. So I'm actually kind of embarrassed that my wife introduced you to me and was like totally surprised that there's this entirely other platform out there. So I'm really curious as to what it is that you do and you've done. And actually, if we can start, my first question is, how did you get into podcasting? What is your background? I mean, and you don't sound very American to me.
I am the most American person you've ever met, actually, Mike. I can't believe that you said that. I'm native Long Island, of course. Do you know what? I was... So I got into podcasting through, I don't know if I've got any memorabilia. Like, I've got a DeLorean here. I'm a bit of a geek. All right. So, like.
Back to the Future.
Yeah. Back to the Future 3, I think. Although we're missing Mr. Fusion, which is annoying. And I got in 2013, I got this microphone. Our head of design. It's a blue Snowball. Terrible. I didn't get along with it, for litigation reasons. I don't want to say it's terrible, Mike. But we started podcasting because I'm a geek. All right. So, we started this. I used to be a design agency owner, and we started, I started sort of blogging and podcasting about pop culture with Gaz, who ironically is now our head of design here at Captivate. He got me into podcasting and said, look, let's do a podcast about this geek stuff that we do talk about on our blog. And I was looking for like something else to get into. I was an agency owner. The agency was doing all right, and I was sort of bored. I was like the founder and sort of, I guess, the managing director of it at the time. Just looking for something else to do. So I sort of got deep into podcasting as a podcast producer. I was producing my own show, and then went on to produce like a professional show, like a show for business. And around that time, this was like maybe 2014, I was thinking to myself, why is it so difficult to connect this podcast hosting thing to my WordPress site? So we created a business to do it. There's a service business called Podcast Websites, and Kieran and I, who was my co-founder and everything, he was a developer at my agency at the time. We created this, what is still the world's number one WordPress platform for podcasters. It's a managed service. It works. Podcastwebsites.com. We got a badass URL. It works. So then, like, I'm a bit obsessive, dude. So I was, if I love something, I want to know everything about it. And that was what I was like with podcasting. So I think I'd been in podcasting for about 16, 17 minutes before I applied to speak at Podcast Movement. And this is like the early days of Podcast Movement. This is Jared and Dan. I got to know them really early in my podcasting endeavors, and they supported us. And I went out there and spoke, and been doing it ever since. And
so you were ready after a quarter of an hour.
Yeah, it's easy, isn't it? You plug your mic in, you do an interview show, just probably put like on fire at the end of it, like John's done, and he's done all right from it, and everyone else has just copied him, and I love John. In fact, he was one of our first major affiliates. We did some work with him on Podcast Websites, and he was a big friend, and I always admire the way that everyone just puts on fire after everything now because they think they can do what he's done. So I was like, well, this seems easy. I'll go and talk about that. Went and did it all, but then what I found was there were two things that happened. I had loads of ideas. Like, I'm a little bit, my brain works in a bit of a weird way. Like, I'm a pure ADD guy. Like, my brain's in about 53 different places at any given time. And it's like I'm almost a bit naive sometimes. You know, if someone says, oh, you know, you can't do that or you shouldn't do that or no, it's fine, we don't need to do it. I'm like, well, why not? Let's just do it just to see what happens. You know, I'm getting curious about stuff. And that's what happened with podcasting, man. I had all these ideas, and I mean a litany of ideas. And one of them, well, not one of them, but a collective of them were around like, why does hosting have to be like this? And I'm saying this now from the perspective of, you know, Captivate is a top 10 host by episode share every month. You know, it beats out a lot of the bigger players, a lot of the people that you'll know. And I'm saying it from the perspective of knowing and being friends with everyone that you know in podcast hosting. You know, I'm only saying that because I want this to come across as genuine, because it is, and not just me being an ass. Like, I thought to myself, why is podcasting being treated a bit like SEO? In the people that know how to do it want to keep it complicated. And I was like, that seems silly. Like, the hosting part of it is easy. You build a data store, you put a nice interface on it, you stick a CDN on top of it, and you make sure it works. Like, that's the easy bit. Like, hosts shouldn't be applauded for just doing what they say they're going to do. It's like a plumber, like, coming around to my house and wanting a handshake and a big pat on the back for actually being able to do plumbing. You're like, that's sort of the thing that
do your job.
Yeah. So that's what kickstarted it, Mike. I started to think to myself, well, hosting's the easy bit. Why are people not doing more? Because there's so many, like, you know, you think about the creator like you or me, or the podcaster that's in their bedroom and they're talking to this avatar that they've built. And that's, you know, people are teaching them that that's enough and that's the only support network that they need. But it's not. The host's job, our podcast hosting platform's job, is to kind of put an arm around you and say, here are the things that no one told you that you needed to know. And the hosting bit, you sort of need that. We do that bit, but don't worry about that. Here's everything else that's going to help you. And
no secrets. Yeah,
not only no secrets. Like, I like that, no secrets, but also like, here's the stuff you've never thought about. You know, and that's where a lot of, I know we'll get to this, but it's where a lot of Captivate's features comes from. And we get a lot of people saying to us, like, we even get hosts like DMing us like, dude, why didn't we think of that? Like, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't think of it. Because
probably because they're not actually podcasting, maybe.
Well, it could be, yeah. I mean, because I'll be completely honest with you, mate. Like, everything we've done at Captivate is because I'm lazy. I'm like, we should probably do a one-click sponsor kit, because I got asked to build a sponsor deck, and I ain't doing a sponsor deck because I ain't got time for that. So if I just want to press a button, I message Kieran, I'm like, dude, let's make a sponsor kit this week. And then we do, and we release it, and everyone's like, why didn't we think of that? And because you're not lazy like me. But it, you know, all joking aside with that, I think one of the things that really is a disconnect between people in the industry and people who are hobbyists in the industry. There's two things that I think is a disconnect. Number one, people in the industry think that everyone else can spend as much time working in podcasting as they do. They can't. So we've got to be lazy. If we think lazy, we can simplify and we can make things quicker. The second thing is that there's a lot of podcasters out there that call themselves hobbyists but take it seriously. And we found that they weren't being catered for. You were either like a brand or a big podcaster, and everyone tripped over themselves to sign you. Like, come and get on this pro plan. Come and get on this. We'll work with you to get advertisers. Or you're sort of like, you know, you're worth $5 a month, and you will give you shit service because, frankly, like, you know, you're just a number. You can't possibly be serious because you class yourself as a hobbyist. But, you know, I play guitar, I play bass as a hobby. But I'm really serious about getting better, and I'm really serious about when I play a gig, I want to do well at that gig, and I want the audience to enjoy it. And they were the two bits that frustrated me, dude. So that's where it came from. I just thought we can probably do a bit better for people.
I really like that. My background is in radio, and then I got into podcasting. And when I started my podcast, it was the freedom of not being restricted by, you know, all the rules in radio, the language restrictions, the format restrictions. And, you know, I have ideas and my producers didn't like them, or they wanted to do it something differently. So it was the freedom and creativity. So it was always, for me, The production level was really important. I wanted to make a show that everybody liked, but that was it. I didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
How do I get my podcast on iTunes? How do I get people to listen to the podcast? Advertising, that's a pipe dream for so many people. It's something that we want to do, but how do we actually do it? This idea of one click and get it out there, even for me after 20 years, is really intriguing. That's something that's really cool. And if somebody's new in the game, what a wonderful way to really launch a podcast, right?
Yeah, it really is. And I think that's one of the interesting things, Mike, is that, I know we're going to go on to talk about like the newbie podcaster and why that's a great fit for Captivate, but also what's the difference between the new and the established, and why does Captivate fit that? And I think the answer's the same. This is the fascinating thing. The answer's the same, is because once you've learned that stuff, we all face the same problems, So I always use the analogy of like playing golf or playing guitar. Like say when I first learned to play bass guitar, I remember it vividly. I used to play jazz trombone and big band stuff. And one day I knew the notes of the bass clef. So like I used to play bass trombone, and so the music teacher came and said, you know that music that you read for your trombone? Like, here's a bass guitar. That string is that note. That's an E, that's an A, that's a D, and that's a G. Each one of these frets is a semitone. It's a half tone up. You work the rest out. You know enough. So what I was able to do was pick up this thing. And this is similar to podcasting. I was able to pick up the bass, which, is theoretically the mic or the computer. And I was able to read the music, which was my content. And I was really able to go ahead and I was able to get that out there. I was able to play concerts. I was able to play gigs. And that was me distributing what I was playing, which is similar to what a host does. However, just like a podcaster, once I'd learned how to do the bits that get it out there, the bits that just basically stop me from talking to myself and open the door to the world, it's the same in anything. You learn to pick a golf club up, you learn to hit some drums. You reach a point where you open it out to the world. That's when it gets hard. Because no one teaches, like, you never start a podcast. No one ever says, well, Mike, why did you start your podcast? And your answer is never, because I really wanted to learn about sponsor agreements and how to do marketing. Like, isn't that dull? That is really dull. So we were fortunate that our background, like my background, is product strategy and brand strategy and marketing. So we approached it from the perspective, and this is why Captivate, it targets the newbie and the established. Like for us, I said this to someone the other day who were trying to do like a hosting comparison. Like, are you for the newbie or are you for the established? Because that's a checkbox we're putting in the comparison. And I was like, well, what are you? Like, are you for the, do you only work with new people to your industry, or you work for established? Actually, it's not about that. It's about how serious someone takes it and their long-term intent. If your long-term intent is to, have a few beers with your friends, shoot the breeze with some microphones stuck in the middle of the table. If you make a bit of money, all well and good, but you're not really going to push for it, and you forget about it on a Tuesday when you've pushed it up, like, go to Anchor. That's cool. That's what that's for. Crack on. That's brilliant. Okay. But if you actually say to yourself, here's where I am and here's where I want to be. Here's the time that I can spend on this. So I've got 3 hours, 4 hours a week, which a lot of podcasters, that's rich in terms of time for a lot of podcasters. If you've got that amount of time to spend on your podcast, that's where we fit in. So it's not about the newbie. Like, do we teach you how to distribute? Is it one-click distribution? Is the interface simple? Yeah, of course it is. It has to be. Otherwise, we get derided, because it's almost a no-brainer that it's got to be easy to use. But this is more about thoughtfulness in the experience, the design of Captivate, but actually, what do you need to do as a podcaster? So let me give you a great example of this. That sponsor kit from earlier on. You get your first sponsor. It's a pipe dream. And we always teach, we've just rolled our dynamic ad insertion platform out, which we can talk about if we get time. But I wrote a piece about it saying, what is dynamic ad insertion? And I said, well, look, this is very often it's about CPMs. It's about getting 5,000 to 10,000 downloads an episode, and then going off to a partner like Dax and AdSwiz via Captivate, setting some campaign parameters and pulling some ads in based on those parameters. But if you're not that size, you can still benefit from DAI, dynamic ad insertion, because you can go out and sell your own sponsor slots and then backdate your inventory, fill your catalog with ads. What it gives you flexibility. Now, what happens when you go out and get that first sponsor? Because you have the only fly fishing podcast in the Vermont area that targets over 40s dads that fish on a Saturday morning. There's only 100 of them, but that fishing shop in Vermont wants that 100 people. So when you turn up and you knock on the door and you say, look, here I am. I've actually got this thing. There's 100 people and they are desperate to know what the latest equipment is or what the best seasonal, whatever trends are. You can sponsor this and get that message in front of them. And they say, can you give us a deck? Can you give us a one sheet? Can you give us some information? No, because I've not learned that bit yet. Well, it's our job is not to do the hosting. Our job is to go, that button that someone's going to ask you for, that's it. That's the button. And it's not a feature on it. This is where, man, I'm about to rant. This is not about a feature list. It's not about checkbox on a feature list. So we, for example, we do dynamic ad insertion. We do the full gamut of it. We do pre-roll, post-roll, bulk editing. We built an ad painter to replace baked-in ads. We do mid-roll. Other hosts want to tick a box saying they do DAI, but they only do simple pre-roll and post-roll. They didn't think it through. So our job is to be useful in a way that gets you to an outcome. Not that puts a feature list together. It's to get you to an outcome. Because what happens is, if your outcomes keep getting better as a podcaster, we all do better. We keep getting paid every month or every year. And, whatever, I can buy a little bit more Lego. That's cool. But the bigger picture is you keep podcasting and eventually you'll be able to replace your car payment with what you earn from your sponsorship. And then eventually maybe you can pay the mortgage and so on and so forth. Or the worst case is you just carry on enjoying it. Like, that's not a bad worst case because there's no stress, there's no hassle. It's why we built our growth labs. It's why we built the single subscription link, the cross-promotional network features, the simple website. Like, there's so much, man, but it's all born from the need to give you a quick, dedicated outcome. And then just to kind of wrap up on that one, when we launched, it was really interesting because we put a tagline on Captivate, and that tagline is the world's only growth-oriented podcast host. And, we got hammered. We got a few people, some of the old hosts, DMing. Are you saying that we don't care about our audience, our podcasters' audience growth? And my answer was, well, prove it. Like, show me what you've done.
Where is the care?
Yeah. Like, what have you done? Send me a list. Send me some screenshots. Obviously nothing. But that's more than just a mildly antagonistic tagline to get attention. It's the way that we work. And what I mean by that is that every time we come up with a feature, every time that I'm being lazy for my podcast, and I'm like, Kieran, we need to make show notes snippets so that I don't have to keep writing this call to action section. Let's make a snippets section. That's me being lazy. But actually what we do is we run it through that tagline filter. And it's got to hit one of two parameters. Does this thing that we're building save you time as a podcaster, or does it save you money as a podcaster? Because if you save those things, you have more of those things to put into your audience growth. So that's like test number one. Test number two is if it doesn't do that, or if it does do that, does it additionally do this other thing, which is, will this physically help you to grow? So things like our network cross-promotional features. If you get your episode in front of another podcast's audience, at the click of a button, it will help you to grow because you'll aggregate up some new listeners coming from that. So that's the methodology. That's the Captivate ethos, man. And it sort of feels like it's pretty well thought out and strategized, but it's just the way that we are. It just feels obvious to us to be like that.
This is so... I'm getting the feeling that, I work with, I host all my podcasts at another company. I know and it's great. I got no problems. I have no issues at all. But I also feel as though I don't really have a relationship with them at all, and which is fine, in a business situation because I'm like in and out. But then again, there are these things. God, I wonder how. I wish I could. How does that? And there's no answer. I mean, there's probably some videos or a blog, but I don't have time to go to a blog and read about this and look it up. But it'd be nice if there were an actual kind of community just readily available, a support team that you could pop in and say, hey, I'm trying to do this. Does Captivate have that type of thing?
Oh, it's huge, Mike. Yeah, that's where we major. That's the community and the education is something that we're really passionate about. So we do a few things with that one. We've got, we're almost a bit too transparent with things. And I know that's really, everyone says they're too transparent because it's what people want to hear on social media. We're all supposed to be transparent. But I'm talking, almost to a fault where it'll be me popping in. And, you sometimes see those things on Twitter. It's like, this is not the views of the company. I'm like, this is the views of the damn company. All right. So, because this is how we work. So we do a lot of community work. So what I mean is we've got our Facebook community where we do every month, we'll do a growth, what we call it our growth workshop, our growth mastermind, our Q&A. And that's me and often someone from the team or an expert guest coming in and talking about something specific. But it basically, you can come along on that Wednesday and say, dude, I've hit this plateau and I've tried all this social media stuff and this consultant's come up and told me he wants $997 for this course and it's reduced from 40 grand for 20 minutes only. Should I buy it? And we're like, stop, don't buy the damn thing. It's that kind of scenario that we put ourselves in, is that we can give that kind of feedback, but also give real tactical advice. There's a lot of stuff that I do on my podcast, the Podcast Accelerator, which is real, it's marketing essays. It's real tactical stuff and strategic stuff that we then bring into the mastermind group. And that, anyone that hosts on Captivate can access that. But we also, we've got what we call our Captivate Growth Labs. A lot of people have an education academy and all that kind of good stuff. We actually went a step further with that. So built into Captivate, I'm not talking you can click a button from Captivate and go to a link. It's built into Captivate. We've got just courses and courses from Heather Osgood, True Native Media, on how to get your first sponsor, Gavin Bell on how to run your Facebook ads. We've got how to repurpose your content. We've got how to build your email list. We've got social media tactics. We've got checklists, downloads, resources. And they're all, like I said, they are in Captivate. So we can start to get a little bit interesting with that. Wait a sec, we see that your downloads, your downloads have plateaued a little bit. Here's this thing that is going to help you to do that. So we're proactive with that as well. And it's, I don't know, again, it sort of feels like an obvious way to work. I can't imagine doing business any other way.
So as a newbie, and like you said earlier, a bunch of guys just sitting around, throw a mic on the table and drink and talk, Anchor's fine. But if you are being serious, you probably are going to pay for your hosting, and that's a minimal cost. What is it? And I think we've already answered it. The newbie can really benefit from something like Captivate, it sounds like. The serious newbie.
Yeah, there's two ways to probably think about that, Mike. There's the there's the almost overly transparent, straight talking, no BS attitude. Kieran and I founded the business. Everyone that works here, has got to go through our filter of, are you all right telling people that what they're saying is BS? That's sort of a natural Captivate thing that we do. So I know that sounds a bit antagonistic, but actually it's much more friendly than any other host. Because what we'll do is, look, if I had it yesterday, someone emailed me, Mark, I've launched my podcast, I've done 10 episodes. It's not growing. And I said, and this was an email, you ain't getting this from any other host, right? I sent one back saying, tell me what your marketing is. Sent me all the marketing, social media sharing. I was like, dude, you've got to stop doing that because that's promotion. It's not marketing. And here's 10 resources that I've created. And here are things that you can do. And also my personal advice to you is do this specific thing. And they sent an email back just saying that's fantastic. And so that's one layer to it, which is the softer side of it, which is that you will get real honest feedback on what to do. Right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the feature set. We exist not to host. We exist to help you to build your podcast. So as a new podcaster, you're going to want to, for example, get your subscribers up, followers, whatever we're calling them these days, depending on what app we're in. We have provided so many tools for the newbie that will make that easier. Things like our single promo link, so, everyone else is go and get your, podcast where you get your podcasts. Yep. Cool. That's great. How the heck do we measure that? We've got no idea. So what Captivate does, we've got a single promo link. It's free. It's included on every single podcaster's plan. And whatever your domain is, whether you connect your own domain to Captivate or whether you use our subdomain, just stick /listen at the end of it. And in all your calls to action, you can say to listen to the podcast or to follow it, go to whatever, markasquith.com/listen. Now, that's a small thing, but it adds up because we track all of the clicks, we track all of the follows, we track everything through that. You can reconfigure where things are. So if you're trying to build your Spotify subscriptions, you can focus on that more than, say, Apple or vice versa or Player FM. So it's little things like that that will, we talked earlier about the established podcaster. If you think about an established podcaster 100 episodes in, how much stuff do they wish they'd done at episode 1? So for the newbie podcaster, we try and make it short so that they don't have any of those wishes 100 episodes in, So, and we do that through the features, which is newbies really appreciate that. And it's because it's time saving, but it's also confidence saving, So that's where newbies can really benefit.
So what about the established podcaster? I just logged in to my account and I was looking at my settings and stuff like that when I upload a new episode, and it just gets longer and longer. All the show notes, just all the go here for this, go here for that, go here for this. It gets longer and longer. It's kind of ridiculous. Is there a benefit in me? Can I migrate, or would I just move? What happens here for somebody who's already established and has got a lot out there?
Yeah, good question. So you can certainly move. It's super easy. Moving between podcast hosts should be very, very easy, and Captivate will hold you through that. It's a very, very simple process. I think there's two. I'm gonna come at this from the perspective of someone that's got a large podcast episode inventory. So someone that's got 100, 150 plus episodes. You said everything's getting longer and longer. You've got the show notes, the calls to action. Where are people going? What are they clicking on? Do we know that? Do you know what people are?
No idea.
All right. So point number 1. So we've got our own first-party attribution link system where all of your calls to action, Captivate will shorten them up, turn them into short links that are linked to your podcast domain. Mine is mark.live. That's my domain. And every call to action I say, if I said to you, if you said, Mark, what's your Twitter? I'd say mark.live/Twitter. And then Captivate will track that. And we can link it to the episodes and see what the efficacy is of any given episode call to action. That's part of what we're rolling out very shortly in Q1. And we've got attribution links. So that's all first party and it's connected to Captivate. So that's the first thing. The second thing is massive inventory, auto cross promos. You can use our dynamic content platform, AMI, which is called AMI because it stands for Audio Monetization and Integration Engine, which is Q. So that's our dynamic ad solution. And what that allows us to do is, what's the point of only being able to sell sponsors for your future episodes? If you're direct selling, for example, let's assume you're direct selling to a sponsor. In order for you to really succeed with sponsorships, you've got to lift your entire inventory. You've got to say, right, I will get 10% uplift on my entire inventory and I'll sell that uplift to you, the sponsor. With Captivate, what you can do is you can promo using AMI, insert your promos for all your old episodes. You can dynamically insert them. You can pop them in as a mid-roll or a post-roll. Also, we tend to find people coming to us because they want the community. Most people only move podcast hosts because they've hit a plateau. I can't get past this download. It's great. We're still getting the same downloads per month, but how do I get past that? Or how do I get past these episode downloads? Benefit from the Growth Labs. Come and learn how to do this stuff. Come and learn how to do the work that we do in the podcast mastermind that we run. So it's that kind of thing that we do for established podcasters. And that's only getting better. We've just released guest booking. So, most people use Calendly or Schedule once. That's pretty. That's cute. It works. They are great platforms. Wouldn't it be better if it was free and if it was included in your Captivate account so that all that data could be linked? Like, okay, Mike was on my podcast. And every time he comes on the podcast, I get a spike. Isn't that cool? I wonder what's going on there. We should get Mike on more. Or I can use their data in variables. So, we talked about snippets earlier. Isn't it annoying building show notes up and writing show notes? No need, because Mike's given me his bio and given me his links and given me his title and given me his social media. Let Captivate do the work. So again, it's about giving you either specific tools to grow or giving you time and money back. Because if you've got those two things, you can invest those things in growing. So that's what people tend to get from us.
What's the learning curve? Is it pretty quick? Is it take a month, take 6 months to really take advantage of all the things that you guys offer?
Oh yeah, good question. So I listened to a podcast the other day and then tweeted the podcast and said, I'm going to give you Captivate hosting because I love your podcast. And they moved on Thursday. Yeah, they're cool. They moved on Thursday or whenever it was last week. I just spoke to them today. They're up and running. They've got everything rocking and rolling. They're using everything. It depends how you want to structure it, but their podcast is live. They're benefiting from things like the attribution links, from the single subscription link, absolutely instantly. Some of the stuff that you might want to do that sort of replaces some of your workflow stuff, like your guest booking, you might want to take, 2 hours to set that up if you really want to. Probably get it done in like 30 minutes. So we've been really careful to make everything very, very obvious, because if there's two problems that come from when things aren't obvious. You get frustrated, and when you get frustrated, you start thinking about leaving. Like, we don't want that because we still want to, we've got to pay the bills. So if we can make life easier for you and make you more successful, we all do better. And that's why Captivate's so easy. So you'll be up and running in half a day, easily on such a big podcast.
That's very intriguing because, once again, I have no complaints, right? With what I've been doing for years. So, when you don't have any complaints, when you're happy with the status quo, sure, the grass might be greener, but my grass is fine. But then again, you touched on some really key issues. There is some frustration at times, very, very seldomly, but those little frustrations pop up and they never get resolved. And you just move on. And I'm speaking as an established podcaster. So this is very interesting to me. And as a new podcaster who's really thinking about taking this seriously, it just seems like a no-brainer because, once again, and I don't want to mention the companies because I like them. They're great companies. They do a great job hosting and everything, but it just doesn't seem like they have the depth, and I don't want to use such a cheesy word, but so to speak, the love of bringing you up and bringing your game up too. And I think that's what it seems like you have over there.
Well, I think what's interesting with that, Mike, and I appreciate that. So that's very kind of you to say. And I think that's really a choice in our business model. If you are, if you are offering freemium hosting, or if you're offering cheap hosting, you need a lot of people. You need a lot of people. And for us, actually, we don't want to be the world's biggest podcast host. We want to be the right podcast host for our people. And that's where it's at for us. We want to really target, and we do. Our messaging is very clear for the serious independent podcaster who genuinely takes their podcasting seriously. It is the perfect place because we don't have to. We only do a 7-day free trial. We don't do 14 days. We don't do free. We don't do any of that, because if we did, we would have to be more concerned about getting more of those than we would be than looking after you. And so it seems counterintuitive. It would build a business that we didn't want to build, which is
become
why,
like the others.
Yeah, and it's not even. I don't think it's even become like the others. I think it's like I want to wake up on a morning and talk to you, and say, right, Mike, what's going on, man? We got to shift these numbers up. What can we do? And you might say something that spurs a feature idea that thousands of podcasters can benefit from, or you might benefit from a quick chat on Facebook on one of the masterminds, and you go, right, Mark, do you know what? I needed that. Just a quick snap has really helped me just get my brain in gear. And that's what we want to build, which is why we do things like we do.
I absolutely love it. You know what? I think, if you don't mind, I'd like to actually finish the interview now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to migrate at least one of my podcasts over to you guys, and I'm going to try it out. I assume it's pain-free. I assume if I try it out for 3 months, is that going to give me enough time to get a feel for everything? And then can I have you back as a guest? Does that sound cool?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing that I will add as well is that if you look at our changelog, like we release features. Like, we release more features in a year than some people have done in their entire lifetimes. Like, we put hundreds of features out last year. And that's not a joke. It was hundreds. And we do that so that you can get a good representation of what works for you, because what works for you ain't going to work for me, So we've got to try and look after our people. So yeah, try it on me for 3 months, dude. Drop me an email after this. Try it on me. I'll hook you up.
Well, I'm not going to do it that way, just because I want to. Just for my listeners, I'm telling everybody right now that is an unbelievably generous offer. I really appreciate it, but I'm not going to take it. But I am going to shift over my podcast. One or two. I have three, and I think I'll shift over one or two just to really get a feel for it and see what happens. I'm really genuinely intrigued about this. So I will send you an email, and you can, I assume, you can hook me up with whoever it is that can help me migrate. But yeah, this is very intriguing, and I'll call this part one of this interview. And I really appreciate your time. And yeah, I'm kind of excited to experience this Captivate situation, and yeah, I have my wife to blame.
Oh, well, I mean, I can only be thankful. So please say thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the integrity as well on that one. And doing it that way for the listeners. I think that's testament to your brand, dude. So yeah, I'm always around to help. That's fantastic.
So there you have it. I'm going to give them a try. I'll report back on it. Everything from the migration to the setup to the ease of use to the effects it has on listenership. So give me a few months to get all that done. And if you have any more questions, of course, you can ask me or Mark or Captivate directly online. Twitter at Captivate Audio. And for Mark, at Mr. Asquith. Mr. Asquith, it's just MRASQUITH. And both those Twitter accounts are quite active. And, of course, the website for Captivate is captivate.fm. All right, captivate.fm. Now, let's critique a podcast, Crimeocopia. Crimeocopia. I like that name. And they've got great art, too. Crimeocopia has stepped up to the plate and offered themselves. Geoff and Q started a podcast recently in a genre with a lot of competition. To stand out, content is king, but quality and flow are what make listeners stay. My advice follows. Podcast critique time. This time, the victims are Crimeocopia. Perfect, the victims, right? Crimeocopia, Geoff and Q. They have a really interesting podcast. Just 4 episodes so far. They're just getting started, but their story format is great. They have a nice angle, great rapport, and I think this is one of those podcasts that could really grow and become very popular. So I really like the way you guys are doing your intro. Geoff and Q, the quality is great. It's very interesting. It's kind of funny. It's a little bit long, but that's okay. Now, I do want to talk about your audio levels, though, and this basically means the volume. I recommend, especially for Geoff, that you do something called normalize. You can do it for both of you, of course, but you want to normalize your recording. And what that means is the levels, the quality of the levels are different between you, Geoff, and Q. I'm guessing it's different mics. I think one of you seems to be recording locally. The other one seems to be recording maybe over Skype or Zoom or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what your setup is, but that's my guess. And I'm guessing that Q is the one who's recording locally. Anyway, I want you to get the levels the same. So if you would look at your audio in a DAW, in a software where you can edit your audio, you're probably going to see Q's volume or voice pattern is very full and very strong, and Geoff, yours is going to come in weaker and thinner, and probably your peaks aren't going to be as high. You need to normalize that, which means bring the peaks up to Q's level, and it's going to sound so much better. Now, actually, it's interesting because in the earlier podcast, the levels were better, but in the last one, not as good. Again, you guys have great rapport, which is so important. And I know you give your Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter links at the end, but give them more frequently. And in the opening, at least, I would give that out there too, because people are going to, they want to, if they like your stuff, they want to follow you. It's really easy. It's cornucopia wherever you go. So it's really easy, but go ahead and give it out. Whenever you get the chance,
mention your listener's name. Read their comment, mention their name. It builds a really strong rapport, and people love to hear their name or their handle. It's a great thing to do. I like the background music in the overview for episode 2. And the closing track that you guys are using is a great choice. It's Mysterious by Vodovos, but you need to credit them, okay? So although it's royalty-free music, they do have a stipulation on what they want you to say or how they want you to credit them, so make sure you do that, all right? And the directions are right there on their YouTube channel. So that makes me wonder about the opening, too. Is it royalty-free music that you're using? And does that person require that you mention them or give them credit? Okay, that's important. I don't think you guys gave out an email address, and I really recommend it. Not just the email address, but actually make a list. Get a list of your followers, and you can use something like Aweber, which is free, and I would love it if you used our link, all right? And that'll be in our podcast notes. It's in our newsletter, too. And by the way, great artwork, great design for everything that you're doing with Crimeocopia. Oh, and there's one more thing. So when you give a link out on Twitter, for example, and I'm using my iPhone, and I don't have all the apps. There's so many different apps to listen to podcasts, right? But the app that really seems to be the nicest, the link rather, is Podbean, Podbean. It's a great link that I would really recommend you and other people use for your social media, because you don't really get bothered by the install the app. Now, they do have a little button that says install the app, but you don't have to. You just scroll down and hit play. You get the show notes and everything. And I know other ones do that too, but I have no affiliation with Podbean, but I really do recommend pushing the Podbean link just because it's really hassle-free. Other than that, you guys are doing a tremendous job, and you're just starting out. You're doing great. Get your audio levels up there. Mention some names. Get an email list going. And don't forget to, tell people your Instagram links and Facebook and Twitter. Crimeocopia, everybody. Crimeocopia on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just say that. It's really important. And once again, that email. Do it. Get that stuff. You guys are doing great. And I really enjoyed the episodes, and I subscribe. So, yeah, there. Good job. You're doing great, and congratulations. Keep up the great work. And our offer for exclusive music stands for you guys, since you allowed us to critique you. So if you're interested in that, send me an email, all right? Mike@introoutrobed.com.
And that's a wrap. Subscribe and listen to all our shows. Rate us, leave a comment. But the best way to get in touch, if you have questions, comments, criticism, critiques, is email me, Mike@introoutrobed.com. Get our IOB newsletter at introoutrobed.com. Music Maestro TJ is very active on Twitter, twitter.com/introoutrobed. On Instagram, too, introoutrobed. And our offer stands. Submit your podcast to us for a format critique. If we choose you, TJ will make you a free custom-made intro just for you and your show. We're on iTunes and pretty much everywhere else you can find a podcast. We would sincerely appreciate a rating and a comment. 5 stars, of course, is the best way to go. And tell your friends. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.